Hello, everyone. I see that we are still loading some participants, but I'll go ahead and get us started. Let me begin by welcoming everyone to this joint Service Academy Cybersecurity Summit virtual session. I'm really excited about today's session. Thank you all for joining. I'm retired U.S. Navy Vice Admiral T.J. White, and I have just a few administrative items before we begin. This is the fourth virtual session in our series following the cancellation of last year's in-person April Summit at the U.S. Air Force Academy due to the pandemic. Our hosts for today are Palo Alto Network Senior Vice President for Public Sector, Dana Barnes, and the Director of the Institute for Future Conflict at the United States Air Force Academy, retired Air Force Lieutenant General B.J. Schweda. Today, we also have a panel of distinguished admirals and generals from across the military services and the Joint Force that I'll introduce after our hosts make opening remarks. They will be speaking and answering questions on the topic of lessons learned from a global pandemic, at least to start with. And all participants, with the exception of our speakers, will be muted throughout the session. This session is being recorded and we'll make it available on the JSAC website following the event. You may submit real-time questions by using the Q&A tab at the bottom of the Zoom window. And we will try to leave time for questions during the last few minutes of the session, but a couple of quick points. First, there are expected to be several hundred participants, many from senior leaders across government, military, academia, nonprofit, and industry, in addition to perhaps our most important audience, cadets and midshipmen from the service academies. And while we'll do our best to get as many questions as possible, we apologize up front if we don't get to yours. Second, we have a team of folks that are screening incoming questions and they'll pass them on to me. It would be helpful if you could identify yourself, but you can also remain anonymous if you like. It will be also helpful if you identify whom on the panel you are addressing the question to if you have a specific ask. And finally, please try to be succinct with your questions. We thank you all again for joining, and I'm honored to introduce Senior Vice President for Public Sector at Palo Alto Networks and former Marine and Naval Academy graduate Dana Barnes, alongside Lieutenant General B.J. Schweda, Air Force Director, Institute for Future Conflict at the United States Air Force Academy. Dana.
Thank you, Admiral White, and welcome everyone to this DSAC event. We're so happy to be participating in this event. You know, our relationship began back in 2015 when we first started doing this, and a lot of those were in person. And as you heard Admiral White talk about, the last few, we've had to go virtual because of COVID, but it still does not deter from what this event is, really bringing together cybersecurity leaders across the military, government, academia, and industry. And I kind of want to point directly to those midshipmen and cadets that are out there. It wasn't that long ago, it may feel long to you, back in the summer of 1990, where I was rolling into Annapolis and they handed me a Zenith Data Systems PC. It looked probably more like a big, massive cinder block for you guys today. But that was the beginnings of my experience with essentially IT and then what would eventually become cybersecurity. And what I learned as a midshipman over those 4 years were key in the foundation. And what you all are learning is so much more advanced today. And I think what you'll bring to us in the future is incredible. And so that's why I'm happy to participate in this event. I'm glad to be here with Lieutenant General Schweda and all the panelists. And from what I've seen so far in my time here at Palo Alto, you know, what we do here and how we engage really does help our Defense Department and really our nation. So I'm happy to be a participant. And Lieutenant General Schweda, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you. I'm going to jump right into the cadets and midshipmen. Quite frankly, we've always saw that old grad that always told you that they had it tougher, you had a weak beast, and it was much harder when they went. I'm not going to be that grad. The transition from the global war on terrorism to strategic competition is going to be much tougher. The challenges will be across the board, but today I'm just going to focus on cybersecurity. After graduation, I went to Desert Storm, and we were immediately tasked with turn the lights out in Baghdad. During Desert Storm, I knew all of my classmates and the people that go before me would be able to deliver on that promise because we knew these were the right targets. The dependence of militaries and modern societies on electricity would cause cascading effects. Also, I knew to anybody that wanted to do that to us, I had full faith in my friends that were flying F-15s that would deny them the capability. But for you, the cadets and midshipmen, you have a far greater challenge. In the case of Turn the Lights Out in New York, there's no Bear bombers, Blackjacks, or Badgers needed because the Secretary of Energy, Jennifer Granholm, has already acknowledged that we are susceptible to power grid attacks and vulnerabilities from cyber, circumventing those F-15s that I earlier talked about. In addition, when I was a cadet, I learned about Palesti raids, where lots of American airmen died trying to deny the Germans oil and gas. But recently, the Colonial Pipeline attacks showed that they had no loss of life and probably could have produced better results than we did during World War II. Lastly, during Desert Shield, the world watched us move the equivalent of Oklahoma City in bombs, bullets, and beans that enabled Desert Storm, but future adversaries will not allow us to move materials unopposed because they know if they do, their only recourse will be to win the toss and elect to receive. There's a recent Wired magazine that shows the effects of ransomware on logistic movements. Although it talks about the Maersk, quite frankly, it tells the effects on a nation state and any company that tries to aid them. Lastly, the primary people that are in charge of defense in electrical grids would be the DOE. In pipeline, it's DHS and TSA. And for commercial entities, it's the local IT shop. And the bottom line is bad guys are exploiting these defenses. So we have a lot to discuss in the future. And the good news is a lot of people on this call are responsible for those solutions. But what I'd like to propose is in the spring, we have everybody come to Colorado Springs, COVID permitting, tentatively for the 19th through the 20th of April to further tease out a lot of these discussions that we're going to have today. So without any further ado, I'd like to turn it back to the experts in this forum and start discussing all of the things we have to discuss in the future.
BJ, thank you. Dana, pleasure as always. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, please allow me to introduce our distinguished leaders for today's discussion. Once complete, I'll turn over the floor to each of them for some brief opening comments. First, we have Lieutenant General Steve Fogarty, Commander of Army Cyber Command. Next, Lieutenant General Tim Hawk, Commander 16th Air Force and Air Force Cyber Command. We also have Air Force Lieutenant General Charlie Tunamore, Deputy Commander of U.S. Cyber Command. And we have Lieutenant General Bob Skinner, Director of the Defense Information Systems Agency and Commander of the Joint Force Headquarters for the Department of Defense Information Network. And last, we have Rear Admiral Mike Ryan, Commander of U.S. Coast Guard Cyber Command. Fellas, it is great to be with all of you again. Okay, as we move into the first topic for today, it has been 2+ years or so since we did this forum in person, front and center on the calendar. Of course, as you know, better than most is COVID-19 and global pandemic response. What would you offer as the big observations and lessons learned with respect to your formations and your missions? Tuna, over to you.
Hey, TJ, thanks for the question. Good to see you, Dana and BJ as well. I appreciate the opportunity to talk to everybody today. I think there are several big lessons we had here at the command as it relates to the pandemic. First was when it hit, how are we going to continue to execute the no-fail portions of our mission while simultaneously continuing to care for our most important asset, which of course is our folks. That's no small challenge. One of the ways we did it was standing up the CVR, our commercial virtual remote environment that would allow individuals to perform telework from home, obviously in an unclassified type of setting. But being able to perform those functions from home, being able to communicate with those people was absolutely vital to us continuing the mission and keeping people informed. I'll also tell you that it was no small task to stand that up because it wasn't just a Cybercom or NSA effort. We worked very closely with the CIO and the department and the services as well. That was actually stood up and put into use within just a few short weeks. from very beginning to end. We ended up with about 1.4 million people that were using that capability, and then of course have since burned that down and transitioned over to Microsoft 365 or Office 365. The other big thing that we learned, I think, is that we really needed some type of medical expertise here in the command to stay plugged in with all the goings on, from health condition levels to information about the pandemic, information about the virus, the steps that we needed to take, any type of changes in policy, et cetera. And then the fourth big thing is information flow was vital. So back to that CVR environment, back to when we did have people here at work, how we keep them fully informed, needing to hear from the commander as well as all the mid-level leadership and our subordinate commanders as well. So they knew what was going on with the mission and they knew what was going on with the virus.
Okay, thanks for that. Bob Skinner, over to you.
Thanks, TJ and Dana and BJ. Great to see everybody, and I love being at this event. And as I mentioned earlier, I think if we can do this in person, it's even that much better. I'll tell you, working as a subcomponent of U.S. Cyber Command, as well as an organization that is aligned to the CIO, as General Moore mentioned, CVR was kind of the big hit that we worked from our Cloud Capability Program Office to working with Microsoft and all the different services and organizations to get that up. I will tell you, to me, the biggest lesson learned was the force was not very mobile. If you look at the ability of the entirety of the force to do the missions that they've been assigned at the unclassified and the classified level, the higher up classification level you went, the less opportunity individuals had to continue that work that was not happening within the location and in the office space. And so the ability to increase the virtual private networks, thousands of %, the ability to have more circuits, because now your bandwidth is a little bit different than what it was sitting from the office and location versus at your home. That was significant work across the board. And as I mentioned, the classified mobile devices is really where I think there was an intersection of what we were doing from a government standpoint, but also from an industry standpoint, is leveraging commercial solutions for classified capabilities to get that out quicker, and whether that's through a other transaction authority from a contracting standpoint. So we really set the stage from a contracting mechanism to leverage the guidance out there to go faster in providing more capabilities from a mobile standpoint. I'll tell you the second thing that we really learned was the impact of a pandemic and a significant change in your work schedule on the individuals and on the collective team. I'm still not convinced that we have learned everything about how individuals work today and the difference between what it was pre-pandemic to what it is now to what it will be as we look at the, I'll say, post-pandemic or the next future state. And so the ability to understand, as General Moore mentioned, the medical and the social and the physical aspects of making sure that individuals who prosper at the office and who have a little bit more time or a little bit more trouble at home and vice versa, how do you make sure that as the totality of the force that you're able to satisfy their needs as making the collective team, not just individual, more effective. Those I would say are the two big ones that we learned across the board. Over.
Hey, Bob, thanks for that. Tim Hawk, over to you.
Thanks, TJ. Really appreciate being part of this forum. A couple of things that I'd add, I really would echo what General Moore and General Skinner said in terms of how we approach the problem. We've really looked at it through a risk to force and risk to mission lens in support of our service. And of course, first comes the safety and health of our airmen, our families, and being good teammates in our community. As we've approached how we looked at risk to mission, it was how do we scale the ability for our service to telework? And a huge public thank you to DISA in terms of their partnership to allow us to scale from 7,000 teleworkers to 300,000 teleworkers as we executed the SecDef Stop Movement Order last March. One of the things that's universal and reaffirmed through this Couldn't be prouder of the leaders throughout our organization. Our squadron commanders, our superintendents, first-line supervisors that have been creative and ensure that we've been able to put airmen in the right position to still execute their mission and do it in a safe and effective way. They've been absolutely phenomenal in circumstances across the globe that have varied from Korea to San Antonio to Italy, and working with any number of partners to ensure we're doing it the right way. So that is probably the area that just really makes you proud and excited to see that we'll take on any challenge, and our airmen, as part of the joint force, will get after it.
Tim, thanks. Steve Fogarty, over to you, sir.
Hey, TJ, thanks. And it's great to see Dana and BJ also. Appreciate the opportunity to join my teammates on this panel. Just to provide some scope, so for Army Cyber, we have about 17,000 employees. They're located around the globe at 160 different locations, and we're responsible for supporting 1.1 million soldiers, civilians on any given day at any given time. And they're scattered across 288 camps, posts, and stations. So that's kind of the size. I think all the other services are really about that same size. And that should give you some idea of the complexity. So it's NIPR, SIPR, top secret networks, and it seems like everything in between. I think the first thing was having an effective higher headquarters was critical, because NSA and Cybercom actually saw this coming, I think, much faster than the services or anyone else. General Nakasone seemed to have a sixth sense for this. And at a commander's conference, really before this devolved down into very rapidly, he got all the commanders together and said, hey, we got to take a look at the workforce. We got to bring the subject matter experts in, and you have to prepare for this. So that became critical. For us, 85% of our daily mission is operate and defend. And what I will tell you is the Army dispersed from its traditional operating locations, the dependency and the workload on Army Cyber increased exponentially. So a lot of people went home, and frankly, we couldn't until we could provide solutions to them. And we went through, I think, like every service, we went through a variety of different solutions until Cybercom and NSA and DISA provided CVR. So that really became, I think, the turning point for us. So it addressed the mobility challenge, and it was actually enabled ease of use, particularly for those who didn't have government furnished equipment, so a government cell phone or a government laptop. And that was absolutely critical. A couple of other things for us, the VPNs, we accelerated our migration behind JRSS. And so everything I just described would not have happened without the capability of DISA and JFHQ DoD. And so when I kind of look back at the most important single player in this, it actually was DISA and JFHQ DoD, because they enabled really a very rapid transition, I think. We had to prioritize the critical mission. There were a couple that we provide as an enterprise service to the command. Those were the most important. We had to come into some really imaginative ways to ensure that if someone got infected, they didn't bring the entire mission down. And again, we took the lead from Cybercom and NSA as they did this. Training was a big problem, because what we found is some of the high-end training, there was really no provision to do it in a distributed manner. And so we're still making up from some of the challenges we had there. And then the last thing is, in the middle of this, we had to move our headquarters from Fort Gordon or from Fort Belvoir, Virginia, down to Fort Gordon, Georgia. So it couldn't have happened at a worse time, but we had no option on the timing. We just had to get the workforce set and then start to move down here. That's where I'm talking to you from now. We occupied this about a year ago, really in the middle of the pandemic. And so I can't thank our workforce adequately for the challenges that they face. And like everyone else has said, it went down to the people at the end of this. Thank you.
Steve, thanks. Okay, Admiral Ryan, over to you, sir.
Hey, thanks, sir. Really appreciate the opportunity to participate in this forum. And I think a lot of our reflections on the pandemic mimic the things that the audience just heard, but I'll highlight a couple other key ones. When I look inside of the Coast Guard, COVID-19 served as an opportunity for us to expedite investments that we had envisioned, to be able to create that more mobile workforce, really to solidify some of the foundations, both network and comms and capabilities, leveraging partnerships, as General Fogarty pointed out, with DISA and JFHQ DoD. That could not have been more pivotal to our collective success. And similarly, I think it reinforced for our service the criticality of our role as a cybersecurity service provider. And that probably didn't resonate as much with our senior leaders, and definitely not down to the deck plate. When you think about the utility and the criticality of that secure, operate, and defend role, but really help to reinforce how does what Coast Guard Cyber executes complement and really drive off of what the CIO's organization looks to deliver. So we use this as a pivot point. And I think as General Fogarty pointed out, I could not be more proud of our crew's resilience, as the rest of the workforce was pivoting to a remote environment and having demand signals elevated as they tried to acquire capabilities that we hadn't put in place. It was our frontline operators within CG Cyber that were working around the clock to deliver that. And I think the other kind of reflections that I have when I look a little more broad than just the Coast Guard influence, I think we all can recognize that adversity is opportunity for our adversaries. And, over the last year and a half, we've seen some really high-level attacks that influence the domestic landscape. And the Coast Guard is right in the middle of all of that when we think about our role protecting the maritime transportation system. And so COVID likewise disrupted, a number of other federal agencies, those key partners that we are routinely engaging with on a day-to-day basis. And they were in a different work posture. And so we needed to adapt to that while still being mindful that, hey, that was prime time for our adversaries to hit, and making sure that we could defend the nation as well as we could our own terrain. So a lot of great lessons, proud of what the Coast Guard crews were able to accomplish. We're still driving through it, but prefer not to have to repeat that anytime soon. So thanks.
All right, Mike, thanks. Okay, fellas, we've seen some big changes at the national leadership level alongside some extensive recommendations flowing from the Cyber Solarium Commission. What do you think the next big improvements we can hope to see out of implementing those recommendations in the next year or two? And I'd like to pitch it to Tim Hawk to open up.
Thanks, TJ. Well, I think one of the things we're certainly excited about is the world-class team that we're working with across the national security apparatus, from the NSC, Ms. Newberger, and from Chris Inglis's appointment, and then Jen Easterly working out of CISA in close partnership with Rob Joyce and CSD. I mean, really a world-class team. And it really does help us connect with General Noxoni's strategy. His strategy of persistent engagement to enable defend forward has been an approach that allows us to focus on enabling and acting. And in this case, enabling DHS success or FBI success is really something that's central to our strategic competition with China and Russia. And those teammates, what we're expecting from them is to increase public-private partnership and also to be able to really leverage what data we could generate in Cyber Command or NSA in our operations that would help our nation to be more effective. From a service perspective, what we're really excited about is to be able to partner with all elements on critical infrastructure. One of the key things that we're starting to evaluate as we think about logistics under attack and those potential threats is what does it look like in the infrastructure in our bases? And then who do we have to partner with for the things we're dependent on to be able to generate combat power across our service? Of course, many of those things that threaten logistics under attack, cyberspace. So we see this team with aligning really closely where General Noxoni is pushing us. And that really gives us an opportunity for unity of effort across all these various elements to produce the outcomes our nation needs.
Okay, thanks for that. Hey, Admiral Ryan, you occupy a little bit of a unique spot as a uniformed service inside DHS and is also a Joint Force Commander in a formation. How's this going to impact you and what are you hoping to see?
Hey, thanks, sir. So I really look at this as a fabulous opportunity for the nation. Those visionaries and strategic leaders that have been mentioned, they've worked together before. They share common foundations and bonds. They are positioning the organizations underneath them to drive down on partnerships that can be much more effective and really operating at the speed of need that cyberspace requires. We couldn't have asked for the forces to come together in a more coordinated fashion than right now. And so when I look at that fence straddling that the Coast Guard occupies across all of our mission space, a military organization and service, and in this case, a service cyber component under General Nakasoni's leadership, but likewise, mindful of Secretary Mayorkas in the Department of Homeland Security. And we can operate domestically each and every day. But what we're seeing are the emergence of some new power players. When you think about the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, CISA under DHS, serving as a maestro across the critical infrastructure sectors, the Coast Guard's in that realm each and every day. We operate as a sector risk management agency, mindful of the maritime transportation domain. That could not be more impactful on our nation's economy, with 90% of goods arriving on our doorsteps, coming from maritime conveyance. We've got to be engaged. We've got to continue to be collaborative and aligned, whether it's in information sharing or intelligence opportunities or in our priorities. And that's where I think those strategic visionaries that you mentioned are really going to have tremendous impact. They are setting the tone and tempo. Organizations downstream are deriving and really focusing their activities based on those insights. We're going to operate with the speed of need. The Coast Guard in particular, because I see the lessons and the opportunities that the other service cyber components have, created and lived over the last 5+ years. Man, that's a playbook I can follow. It's one that we can adopt and integrate and continue to get better. And we're seeing that materialize to the benefit of the maritime industry, to the nation at large, and really preserving some of that resilience that we need. And, whether it's CISA or the National Cyber Director or the National Security Council or U.S. Cyber Command, the Coast Guard's going to be able to operate effectively across whether it's the inter-service or interagency fabric and be able to continue to deliver, where our mission objectives drive us. So I think great opportunity without a doubt.
Mike, thank you very much. All right, fellas, we're at Time Hack 28. I think I have about 2 questions to put on the table, and then we'll open it up for questions from the audience. It's been about a year since I saw you all last on mission. It seems increasingly clear that great power or strategic competition is commonly understood and agreed. How is it going, and how are we doing from your perspective? And Tuna, if I might, I'd like to pitch it to you to open up.
Hey, thanks, TJ. Yeah, I think when you talk GPC, a great power competition, the key word there is competition. And what is the department doing? And specific to what we're talking about today in the cyber domain, what are we doing in that competition phase? The department has traditionally been extremely comfortable for how we react in crisis, how we hopefully prevent crisis from deterring crisis from turning into conflict, etc. But we don't have a lot of expertise and history as it relates to competition, or what we're calling the competition phase. Unfortunately, we know that our adversaries have seized upon this and seized upon operations that we would consider left of crisis or conflict, below the level of armed conflict, in order to try to achieve some of their goals. And specifically, what we're seeing is those adversaries can achieve strategic outcomes without having to go into the crisis or conflict phase, which has really changed the dynamic across the globe, if you will. And we're seeing a lot of those types of operations occur in the cyberspace domain. Perfect example, intellectual property theft from China. We know that they may perform a whole lot of series of operations, each of which is not good for us. But when you look at them in the aggregate, you're talking about saving them decades and hundreds of billions, if not trillions of dollars in research and development. And like I said, time as well. So positioning ourselves and posturing ourselves to be able to counteract that has been absolutely critical for the department and the nation as a whole. Fortunately, back in 2018, about the same time that we elevated to combatant command status, we put the policy frameworks in place, we put the approvals in place, and then we actually put the actions in place to start conducting cyberspace operations within competition to make sure that we can defend the nation.
Okay, thanks for that. Hey, General Fogarty, if I could turn to you, I'd be interested in your perspective. You've seen it a lot as both an intelligence community commander and now a cyber commander and a previous chief of staff. So I would welcome your thought.
So thanks, TJ. So first of all, we have to recognize our adversaries and competitors are capable, they're persistent, they're agile. But we also have to understand they're not 50 foot tall. And this really boils down to, I think, organization capabilities, people, probably most importantly, and then will to actually contest and impose cost throughout the entire operational continuum. So that's really the big idea behind persistent engagement to defend forward, is to attrit, impose cost, disrupt adversaries who sit in red space, their sanctuary, they plan, they develop, and then they launch attacks. And then as they maneuver through gray space, to attrit them continuously. And then don't let them get into a position of relative advantage where they can strike us in blue space and then run home. So in order to do that, I think Cybercom, NSA, the rest of the IA, our foreign partners, academia, our commercial partners in the private sector have started to work together much more effectively. If you think about the previous question, what do those three leaders bring? Well, they bring the ability to do a couple of things I think are going to be absolutely critical. First of all, they have to increase collaboration between those groups that I just talked about. They have to increase trust, and they have to improve transparency. And if you can do that, then you can increase the speed of being able to operate. General McChrystal says it the best, I think, which is your ability to conduct operations is really based on the speed of trust that you can build from the different members of the team. And I think both Cybercom and NSA are uniquely postured to actually execute this. When we look at the workforce, and it's pretty simple. Our hackers have to be better than their defenders. Our defenders have to be better than their hackers. And so a couple of things. We have to recruit and retain the best operators, whether they're defensive or offensive. We have to give them the tools, the infrastructure in order to either defend or attack as effectively as possible. We have to ensure that they are adequately compensated. So we don't lose them at a unsustainable rate. And then we have to give them the big data analytics, the AI and the ML that is going to be required for them to be able to sense, understand, decide, act faster and more effectively than our adversaries. And I think that's where the command, we have successes every day. But we also are getting hammered every day. And so it's really our ability to recognize the changes that we have to make and then be able to implement those changes as rapidly as possible.
Hey, Steve, thanks for that. Difficult to argue with collaboration, trust, and transparency and the requirement for a great workforce. I think your comments are reflective of our ability to have this conversation presently. That would have been difficult several years ago. General Hawk, over to you, sir.
So adding TJ to those really, I think, insightful thoughts from Steve and Tuna, the way that I look at it right now in terms of where we're positioned from being a component of U.S. Cyber Command is That change in policy, that change in our ability to now use the totality of the capabilities that we have also has brought us an increasing set of partnerships across our interagency with other domain component partners as well as international partners. And I think that's just really been reflective at the options we've been able to deliver back to General Nakasone is now that we're in this battle space in a more coherent, consistent way, we can operate in cyberspace to also then look to see how we create advantage and opportunities in the information environment. And that collaboration with the interagency, with other components, with other combatant commands, and with other nations is allowing us to create maneuver space that lets us be a good partner and to be able to enable others' outcomes while also being prepared to act when General Nakasone calls upon. That's incumbent on us because clearly within the idea of strategic competition, which is about the idea of a nation state creating advantage for their national interests, China and Russia are creating those advantages by stealing intellectual property theft, engaging in disinformation, large-scale supply chain activities. It's incumbent on us to be a good partner with the interagency, but also be prepared to act whenever General Nakasone asks us to.
Okay, thanks for that. So as Tuna pointed out, you reinforce policy, authorities, and actions underpin the partnerships that are vital to creating a maneuver space. Admiral Ryan, over to you, sir, from your perspective.
Yeah, thanks again, sir. Hey, interestingly, the Coast Guard, in the physical domains, we interact with those strategic competitors almost each and every day. We have engagements with China and Russia, whether it be in the high latitudes or along the maritime boundary line up in the Bering Sea, engaged in combating illegal, unregulated, unreported fishing, or in our oldest maritime focus, and that's the safety of life at sea. Not all of those interactions go great. And, I think when our commandant signed out our cyber strategic outlook in August of this summer, really reinforced that we need to continue to integrate cyberspace operations into our full spectrum of mission set and being able to engage maybe with those strategic competitors, but also, in an adversarial relationship as well. A call to action for our service to increase our operational capabilities, align more tightly with the rest of the service cyber components under General Nakasone's leadership, figure out tactically how do we overlay things that have already been tried and true in the cyber arena into our special mission space, maybe holding accountable or imposing costs against those adversaries that are jeopardizing the economic lifeblood of our nation that exists in our port communities and the maritime industry. The maritime transportation system, it's Coast Guard terrain. America is a maritime nation, but that's also a target-rich environment. And the Coast Guard needs to be more effective, more capable, and more committed to ensuring the safety and security of that environment. We're tapping into those partnerships and the intelligence relationships to make sure that we can execute to those demand signals more effectively. So, while we see China and Russia sometimes in a complementary setting, we're also mindful of the fact that, they're pacing to their own objectives. They're looking to outmaneuver the United States, and the Coast Guard, needs to continue to be agile and enhance our capabilities so that we can contribute alongside the other services where the nation needs us. And then again, just driving back to the domestic home front and the criticality of our maritime environment and, just the incredible economic security that's at stake. So, we're in the fight and we're ready to deliver and we're going to continue to get better. So thanks, sir.
Mike, thanks for that. Yeah, as a former sailor, I can tell you a big fan of the Maritime Commons and the services that do that mission. Okay, gentlemen, I think one more structured question, and then we'll tip it over to the audience for their participation. My observation over the last year or so is that we can't seem to open any periodical or journal and not find an article regarding zero trust, joint all-domain command and control, or the joint cyber warfighting architecture. How are we progressing? I'd like to open up with General Skinner and then tip it to Steve and Tim for their view as well. Bob.
Thanks, TJ. I agree with you, right? Zero trust. If you ever have an IT bingo card that's laid out, zero trust is usually the given one, the free one in the middle. I'll tell you, those who think that zero trust is the panacea and the quick win, I think is very short-sighted, right? This is, and I don't think there is a North Star end state. This is a continual journey, leveraging the principles of, never trust, assume breach, and verify explicitly across the board. Because at the end of the day, if you think about what our architectures are trying to do, right there, it's trying to develop the fabric to create multiple dilemmas for our adversaries, while also ensuring we achieve the outcomes that we need to achieve, whether that's in strategic competition, through crisis, to the really bad day from a potential conflict standpoint. And so if you kind of look at it through that lens, then as you talk about JADC2, as you talk about zero trust underpinning JADC2 and the joint warfighting construct, that's the lens that I would look at under. And if you think about even to implement zero trust, right, there's an underpinning of this thing we call identity management that I would offer if you're not talking identity management and ICAM, as well as zero trust, that then supports the architecture from a joint all-domain command and control, then you're short-sighted in that sense also. And then to bring it fully around to, then how do you make sure that you have the mission partners, our allies, our interagency team, and everyone within the department, all of them have to be along and aligned with that same architecture to make sure that you are all moving down the same path. And I think those are the type of things that we're moving forward. And I'll tell you, it's a journey, and we have just started that journey. But if nothing else, we at least have I'll say the blueprint from an architectural standpoint that we can federate the execution of that and still stay aligned.
Okay, hey, thanks for that. General Fogarty, over to you, sir.
Hey, so building off what Bob says, the way we look at the networks is, I think, very critical to this question. So we view our networks as the foundational weapon system for an information age army. So if you want, persistent ISR, you want long-range precision fires, you want effective command and control, you want just-in-time logistics, you want medevac, then your networks are key to every aspect of warfighting. And since warfighting is also a business, your ability to move mass amounts of soldiers, ammunition, chow, whatever it happens to be required to power those operations becomes absolutely critical. So if we approach it as, the networks are a critical weapon system, the foundational weapon system, and that the data in a modern army is the ammunition, then that really puts a fine point on why this is so important. So, it will be a defense in depth. It will be informed by intelligence. The tools and the techniques will all evolve over a period of time, but it goes back to the principles that General Skinner laid out that we all have to adhere to. I think we're all in a different state. As I listen to the other commanders, as we keep track on what they're doing, we're really trying to leverage the lessons that they've learned. So we can kind of measure, twice, cut once, but we still have to do that rapidly because we go back to, our competitors are agile, they're very capable, and they're very persistent. Now, when we look at the defensive piece of this, so remember, I think 85% at least of what Army Cyber does is operate our networks and defend our networks. And again, all that's underpinned by intelligence. That the weapons platform for cybercom, the joint cyber warfighting architecture, is absolutely critical. And I think we're well on our way to actually achieving what we set out several years ago. So whether it's operations, it's situational understanding of our own forces, so seeing ourselves, being able to see the adversary, and then also being able to develop capabilities very rapidly in a very secure way, the ability to train and rehearse, whether it's defense or offense, and have all that interconnected. We're actually seeing much of that, being delivered today, and it will continue to evolve. But I think the big thing, instead of having a bunch of bespoke solutions, it was a decision by General Knoxoni. We're going to pull all this together. There's a reason for joint, and everyone's going to have to give a little to get a lot at the end of this.
Hey, thanks for that. I love that quote. There's a reason for joint. Okay, General Hawk, if I could, over to you, sir.
Copy. Thanks, TJ. So as we're looking at it as our service, the Advanced Battle Management System has three components: sense, make sense, and act. So we look at this from a 16th Air Force perspective through each of those lenses. From the sense perspective, our ISR enterprise and our ability to collect. We've got a sound way forward in how we're approaching JADC2 and our ability to sense. In the make sense component, we've spent a lot of time over the last 2 years within our ISR wings and within our recce wings to be able to convert to problem-centric approach to how we're looking at analysis. So we built analysis and exploitation teams, regionally aligned, targeting teams that allow us to leverage that data and make sense of it so that we can maintain information advantage and then act. So as the cyber component, we would be the ones expected to act inside of cyberspace and the information environment, but we're enabling activities within the air domain. Inside there, what we're expected to do is to defend it all. That we have to be that element that is thinking about cybersecurity, defense of our data links in partnership with the other air components. So we have started to take a really close look at the cyber defense of our weapon systems at looking through a China threat lens. That many of our weapon systems that we view would be essential in crisis with China are things that were actually built before the current cyber threat. So are we doing the right things to protect them? We see zero trust as a future component of that. In the interim, what we're really doing is using some of our big data solutions that are being fed into a very similar approach that will handle the ABMS data. And so we're moving forward. Our secretary has said he wants deliverables, he wants them faster, and he has certainly laid out a really aggressive course for our team within the Air Force to execute ABMS.
Hey, Tim, thanks for that. Okay, those are some of the structured questions. We're at Time Hack 47. So I think we have about 10 or 11 minutes for some audience questions. The first one is from a name that many of you will recognize, an old friend and colleague, Rob Schreier at the Johns Hopkins Applied Physics Laboratory. First, he wants to thank all the panelists and the moderators for being his friend. I'm not sure what that means, but also your personal leadership and your organizations through these challenging past 18 months. We would be interested in hearing any of your thoughts about what you believe the cyber and disinformation threats are to our health ecosystem in its broader terms, and what your organizations can contribute to preempting or countering those threats and lowering the risk to that ecosystem. If I might, Tuna, I'll probably tip it to you based on your perspective, and then maybe to Bob Skinner for a follow-on until we get to the second question. Tuna, over to you.
Hey, well, it's good to hear from Rob, old friend. Hope all's well. Thanks for the question. TJ, it's a great question, and it's an important one. We have dealt with this specific issue as it relates to other aspects of our mission. I will tell you, we have to be extremely careful, as you might imagine, when we start talking about performing operations against quote unquote disinformation. Who gets to decide what is information, what is disinformation? So from a constitutional standpoint, from a legal standpoint, not the role of the Department of Defense by any stretch of the imagination. There are aspects of that we can go after and that we have gone after. Unfortunately, I can't get too specific because in a classified setting, but you can imagine as it relates to our elections, and if individuals are masking who they are, organizations are masking who they are, and then they're conducting some type of an information operation that we would say is disinformation or trying to cause divisiveness within the nation, we have some authorities to potentially act in that type of environment. And it gets to the broader question about important sectors and capabilities like the overall medical systems that I think Rob asked about. Obviously, we work very closely with DISA DHS and CISA and the FBI as it relates to protecting those types of capabilities and that infrastructure. We're primarily going to be focused in red and gray space. They're primarily going to be focused in blue space. You can think about us helping to enable their operations in blue space, providing them information, indications of compromise, etc., while we try to take action against whoever's conducting those operations out in red and gray space. Over.
Okay, thanks for that. General Skinner, over to you, sir.
Thanks, DJ. You know, I'll say the beauty of the Joint Force Headquarters DoD and DISA is that we operate on blue space. And we leave the gray space and the red space to General Moore and the rest of the service cyber components in their Joint Force Headquarters role. I'll tell you, just a real highlight. DHA, right, is very big from a medical health standpoint, and they are, I will tell you, one of the better agencies when it comes to cybersecurity and really getting after this. How do we protect our medical systems? And whether it's from a HIPAA standpoint or just from an actual not allowing vulnerabilities to be exploited, it's very key. And so as we look at the relationship, I'll say, with DoD, as General Moore mentioned, CISA and DHS, as well as DHA within that, I think that relationship is more mature than it's ever been. And the ability to share information from what is being seen across the board from a DHS standpoint and what we're seeing within DoD really puts us in a greater posture than we've ever been to counter the exploitation of those vulnerabilities. And that's really what we continue to focus on, is because if you have an understanding, then you can actually do something about it. And the focus on understanding and sharing of information is really key as we continue to go forward.
Hey, okay, thanks for that. Hey, the next question is a compilation of input from industry reps. Since you commanders have many industry leaders listening today, how can we help you with your challenges? What are the top 1 or 2 things you're looking to us for? So I'd like to give an opportunity to each of the service commanders here to address that, and maybe a 30-second speed round each. I'll open with Steve Fogarty.
Okay, so for us, it's about autonomy to the greatest extent possible. So for my defense, I want to be able to recognize threats. I want to be able to deal with them, frankly, as autonomously as possible, because that allows me to take my brain power, right, or the brain power of my force, apply them against the most complex problems. I still think today we have way too much man in the loop, and we're working tasks that I would consider almost low order, and so that volume becomes an impediment to us. Really, what I want is to be able to concentrate on the variety, the things that are really one-offs that I need to concentrate most of my effort against and put most of my brain power against. So that is so autonomous detection and action, and then on the flip side, to be able to understand vulnerabilities as rapidly as possible, and then autonomously generate options for me to throw back at an adversary.
Okay, got it. So if I can now pitch it to Mike Ryan and then Tim Hawk to follow.
Hey, thanks, sir. Hey, obviously, I've got a laundry list of capability needs. We continue to build out our environments. I talked about some of those driven by the pandemic. I'm relying on my CIO to help design, build, and configure and bring those capabilities to life. And, no unexpected items on that list necessarily. But what I would highlight for this group, we do a lot of business with industry. We're relying upon the capabilities that they can deliver. I'd ask for industry to continue to look within the maritime community and the maritime industry at the port levels, offering up viable solutions that allow them to raise their game from a cybersecurity perspective. There's a lot of mom and pop shops out there in the really high-end, sophisticated corporate and enterprise environments, but all things in between. That is a environment where we need them to continue to engage, help them understand where the threats are at, bolster their defenses, and really, for the nation, raise the bar across the board so we can be more secure and thwarting some of those adversaries. Thanks, sir.
Tim.
Thanks, TJ. So a couple areas I'll just touch on. One, we are excited of the experimentation we're doing through our enterprise IT as a service in both how we're approaching being able to scale our infrastructure, and also how we're experimenting within our security operations center in how we're bringing in technology. So that's a vehicle that we want to continue to expand and we want to leverage with our acquisition teammates. The specific area that I think we're going to look at as we think about our threats to our weapon systems is an area that we're going to look for some industry help. How do we censor legacy components and being able to bring that data back into our big data platform? I'm really pleased with the work that is going on inside our service in partnership with DISA and in partnership with the Army to roll out our big data platform. It's a huge enabler for us to be able to leverage our data in a much more coherent way to defend our network, our enclaves, and our weapon systems. But we've got to get the right data off of our weapon systems to ensure they're part of that ecosystem.
Okay, hey, thanks for that. Okay, so we're at time hack 56, so certainly time for one last question. Tuna, I think I'll pitch this one to you, since it sort of opens up broadly for the DoD and the joint force in terms of reserve integration. From Tony Siebert, how are we building a reserve force capability that meaningfully integrates the depth and breadth of experiences and skills of former active duty operators that have gone on to engage in protecting our critical infrastructure, digital economy, and the private sector, and want to continue to serve their country and protect our digital way of life?
Hey, TJ, thanks. It's a fantastic question. We want to make sure that we're fully capitalizing on all the skills, experience that those individuals bring to the game. But I'm actually going to ask if it's okay with you that Steve and Tim both comment, being our service component commanders, because they can give us some really good specifics that I think the audience would appreciate. So, Tim.
So this is, I think, the perfect, what Cyber Command has done is really set a demand signal to make sure that we also have the ability to surge. Within the Air Force, we've now made the decision we're growing another cyberspace wing in the Guard. That's a vehicle for us to be able to grow capacity in some specific areas. We want to bring in talent that is also tied with state critical infrastructure. On the reserve side, we have a cyberspace wing that is also experimenting with us, both in cyberspace and in information warfare. And those areas are critical for us to be able to bring in talents and skills for individuals that want to serve, but are doing other things within our nation. So we've created both additional capacity in the reserve and the Guard, and we think that's going to be critical to support Cyber Command.
Awesome. Steve.
So I'll just build off what Tim said. Yeah, half of our high-end defensive capability, so 21 cyber protection teams, are in the Guard and the reserve. We cannot do our mission without them. We're building now offensive capability for the attack portion of the mission. And then on the influence, 75% of our capability and capacity sits between the Army National Guard and the Army Reserve. Much of our operate force, particularly our tactical signal force, sits in the Army National Guard and the Army Reserve. As I look back to the support for operations in Afghanistan, all 4 mission threads simultaneously, and all 4 mission threads featured significant capabilities, capacity from both the Army National Guard and the Army Reserve as we conducted that operation in support of Central Command.
Okay, thank you very much. Gentlemen, one last question, and I would, this is a leadership question and an advice question, so maybe each of you just walk the line 10 or 15 seconds. For all those cadets and midshipmen out there interested in a cyber future, what advice would you give them from your experiences? So, Tuna, I'll open with you.
The advice I would give is to follow through. We need you. We want you. We are not going to be able to perform the traditional military activities that we've historically done if we cannot achieve cyber superiority. All of those missions and capabilities that we traditionally look at are dependent upon it. We're going to need the right people. We're going to need warriors to help us perform those functions.
Love it. Bob Skinner, over to you.
I would offer the same thing as General Moore, right? We need you, we want you. Information warfare is going to be the key to any type of, I'll say, competition, crisis, and/or conflict. So come on down. We have plenty of positions open.
Got it. Thanks. Tim Hawk.
One, we need you. I think our nation's going to face a threat from an adversary that has already shown that they will continuously target our nation and our economic wealth through intellectual property theft. That's the beginning of that threat. And we're going to need really capable individuals that are going to be able to address that. Thanks for being on the team.
Okay, Steve Fogarty.
So we need you to bring your A game. We will put you to work immediately operating against adversaries of our nation, and then we need you to stay. So don't come into us for your 5-year commitment. We need you to stay as a member of the team. So long term, we're going to give you lots of advantages if you do that.
Love it. Admiral Ryan, over to you, sir.
Hey, thanks, sir. Hey, all those skills, focus, and commitment that we need in the physical domains, we need them in cyberspace warfighting operations as well. So all of those characteristics, traits, and knowledge that you're picking up at your service academies, you'll put that to good use in the cyber arena. We need that same type of vigilance and commitment, and we need that same type of buy-in to the nation's warfighting objectives. So join the team. It's a great profession. Thanks.
Admirals, generals, thank you so very much for your time and participation today. I know the clock is precious and you have given us plenty of it. Hopefully the audience got something out of it. I know I did. And I look forward to seeing all of you live and in person in April 2022 out in Colorado Springs. Thank you very, very much.